Today, my guest is Maria Franzoni. Maria is such a dynamic, insightful, and strategic woman in the space of communication. She is the founder and creator of the Bookability Formula, with over 25 years' experience as a former owner of an international speaking bureau. What she does is help speakers get booked and paid to speak. And she's worked with the greats. She's worked with many brilliant speakers. And through her experience, she knows what makes someone impactful. She has seen what makes someone get rebooked and have a real career in the space of communicating in the public speaking field. And I thought, who better than that to come and help us in our business spaces realize greater levels of impact we can have with how we are speaking, with how we are communicating. It's really practical. We dance around various topics of communication, and there are going to be some points in here that you are going to want to adopt and share with your team. And she also gives some great signposts of where else we can research to get more impactful with our communication. Maria, it is so lovely to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And it's lovely to see you. It's been a little while, so it's great to catch up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's dive in. So, what does extraordinary leadership mean to you, Maria?
I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to use an example of what I call extraordinary leadership that I've experienced. My first experience of a really extraordinary leader was in my first full-time job. And I experienced it again later on in my career as well. But of all the leaders that I've worked with, I can only say two exhibited it. And what they did that made me feel that they were extraordinary is that they could see in me what I could do and be. They could see my potential beyond what I could see. And they helped me to achieve extraordinary goals and achievements and reach my potential. They really stretched me. And for me, that's really an exciting ability. And I think we all do it in others to some extent because we have the expertise and the experience, and we can often see what somebody could do and where they can go. And we don't realize what an amazing ability that is.
How do you think they could see it?
I think it's experience. When you are a leader and you have led people, managed people, but also when you've been through it yourself, you've learned from your mistakes. You know what good looks like. You know what was right and what the behaviors were that were correct and what maybe the attitudes were that correct. And they see it in another individual and think, right, I'm seeing you're ticking this box, this box, this box. You have this ability, this skill, you have this potential. I can see you doing what I have. They can see that path. I do think it's experience and having that lens of that experience and expertise.
It's because as you say that, I was thinking, oh, yeah, I remember, funnily enough, I remember having a teacher at school who for A-level English, and I remember being amazed at how much potential she saw in me when I thought, oh, I'm not that good. And I never had a teacher like it. And what was interesting was I got such good grades consistently with her. And yet I don't really remember what she taught me. I just remember how she made me feel. And that got results. It's kind of that, isn't it?
Isn't that interesting? So for you, it was a teacher,
Yeah.
but for me, it was in work. And they probably were teachers for me as well, but they haven't stayed with me. And one of those leaders, my very first employer, who was one of those leaders, full-time employer, I've stayed in touch with. We've remained friends because he's had such an impact. And he's seen me grow all these years later. And he keeps congratulating me. And I say, yeah, but you set that foundation for me. You gave me that confidence. Exactly as you said,
Wow.
confidence.
It's a huge one, isn't it? When you have confidence, and again, this word that's bandied around at the moment, rightly so, is this psychological safety. When you feel you can be yourself, your confidence is there to speak up and share. Yeah, you can go into new spaces and places to achieve greater things. But let's dive into your area of brilliant expertise. Now, I've personally had coaching with you and found just 1 hour with you utterly transformative in how I communicate. But I want to share it with other people and also get a sort of little cheeky extra freebie insights from you. Let's talk about communication. Okay, and we'll dive into speaking and presenting in a moment. But communication is a word I hear in businesses all the time, bandied around like, oh, it's all about communication. It's all about communication. And it's somehow that word is so truncated, it doesn't actually say anything. How would you define communication and effective communication?
I suppose really I would look at what's the outcome, what's the point of communicating. And I think effective communication for me is something that builds relationships or builds on an existing relationship. So that would probably be my definition, and maybe it's a bit of a simplistic definition, but that would be, it's the intention behind the communication, really, isn't it? So hopefully
Yeah.
the intention is a positive one with regards to that relationship that you're trying to build. So yeah, that would be my very simple. And I'm sure, because this is your area of expertise, communication, you've probably got a much better definition than I have.
Well, I think communication's a bit like the word love. It's like we all kind of know what it means, but so go with me on this metaphor. It's a bit like a currency. So you have the euro or you have sterling, you have the word love, you have the word communication, but within it, there's lots of different measurements and ways of using that currency. So in sterling, you have pennies, you have 50p piece, a 20p piece, a £10 note, a £20 note. There's different types of ways of utilizing the sterling. And in the same way, you've got love or communicating, but that's just a name of a concept. There's within it, there's different things. So there's communicating to stakeholders, there's public speaking, there's day-to-day romantic communication and intimate communication, and there's so many different types within it that to just say, oh, it's all about communication, I'm going to communicate better, is probably the most non-statement you could ever say, is in my opinion. So I always like drilling down into which space, as you say, what's the outcome, what space, what context am I wanting to spend my sterling in order to be impactful?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how that lands. I've never really shared it like that, but what do you think?
No, it's good and I like it. And so I will stick to my original answer in that case, which is the relationships, because I think whether you are speaking publicly, it's about the relationship with the person. You're having a conversation with the person sitting in the audience. And often it's one way, but it's still a conversation that hopefully you're meeting them somewhere in where they're at. If it's, partners and you're talking to each other, we're communicating, we're growing our relationship. We're rekindling the relationship that we had, and we've caught up, and we're now we're going to learn more about each other. So yeah, I'm going to add the word learning. So relationships and learning.
Love it. I love it. So what do you, this is a big question and then we can dive in deeper, but what do you see in your experience of people communicating, speaking? What do you see as the most common pitfall people do when they are speaking, communicating?
Okay. So if I'm going to generalize, rather than talking about a specific situation, what I have noticed, I work with a lot of speakers, and the common pitfall when you're working with speakers is that they are on speaking mode. They're speaking. They're not on listening mode. And so I would say the most common pitfall is not listening very well and being more interested in getting your point of view across rather than finding out a lot more. And I see that as well in emails and pitches where someone hasn't sought to understand the other person before they've gone in and pitched. So it's not listening, not understanding the other person.
It's so just explain that a little bit more. If you're speaking, how can we listen and speak?
If you're a speaker on stage, you do the listening beforehand. That's it, part of your scoping, part of getting to understand the brief, getting to understand the client. Whereas if you're not listening to that client and their needs and their objectives, you're going to go and deliver the same speech time and time again. It doesn't matter who the audience is. You're going to speak every single word in exactly the same way. Whereas if you're truly listening, you're going to adapt it, make it relevant, make it accessible to that audience. So the listening on when you're speaking publicly or professionally is slightly different. It's beforehand, but you're also listening in a way by seeing, I suppose the word isn't listening there. You're observing the body language as well. So you're looking for clues in reaction when
Yes.
you're not getting anything back.
So it's interesting so drilling down into the kind of space where my audience will be. I'm seeing many people needing to present ideas, to share updates, to pitch for a new budget, for more of a budget, to get buy-in from their team, spaces like that. And what I notice oftentimes is that they just do what they've always done. So whether they're sharing key information or whether they're pitching for an idea, the presentation will be very similar. There's not much variation. It's just a one size fits all. So how would you help someone if they came to you today who, let's say, is working quite senior level in some sort of engineering space, because that's obviously like data specific, lots of data, and they are having to email stakeholders frequently or share new budget ideas? How would you help someone like them skill up in listening prior to sharing? How would you help them skill up?
I'm assuming that if they're sending these out regularly, that they know who they're contacting and what they're sending, who they're sending to. And in some cases, it's often about researching a lot more and understanding what's going on for the other person. One of the things I encourage speakers to do a lot of the time when they've decided this is the speech I want to talk about, this is my topic, I sort of tell them to test it out. You could test it out before you actually create that email to the stakeholders by having a conversation with one or two of the stakeholders, find out what's going on, talk to them, ask them what would be helpful for them to be hearing at this time, rather than just going in sort of, and I'm sure people do this. I'm sure they do. Maybe I've just got rose tinted spectacles. I don't know.
I'm a woman on the floor. Oftentimes they don't. Some do, but often people don't even know that's an option, I don't think.
Probably they don't consider it. I think it's really important always to be really in contact with your clients, your prospects, your market, your network, and testing things out, getting feedback, hearing from them what's going on from them. Because if it's relevant to them and where they're at, they're going to read it. But if it's just detached and your point of view without adding some relevance, and also that it's not timely for them, it's difficult. You've got to, somebody says, and I don't know who it is that says it, but it's very clever, meet the people where they are in order to then take them where you want them to go. I don't know who says it. So it's not my quote. Maybe we should look it up, but I think it's a brilliant piece of advice to meet people where they are.
Yeah. Well, there's in coaching, we talk about pacing and pushing. It's the same in sales a little bit. You want to pace with the person in order to then help push them to the areas you think might be better. But you can't push without pacing. So that pacing is that empathy and drawing alongside and recognizing the context of what they're in. That's what I'm hearing.
You know what?
There.
I'm going to say to you, I would rather pull than push.
I like that. Push sounds a little, as I said it, I was like, oh, in a nice way we're pushing. But yeah, let's pull. Pace
Yes,
and
pull.
pull.
Attract,
Right.
even better, attract.
Attract. I like that because actually words like influence can sometimes be, influential, impact can sometimes sound a little bit close to the mark with manipulating, can't it? And we don't want to manipulate. We want to attract and draw. Yeah, I like
Yes.
that. That's a
And
good course correction.
repel. Actually, also, Dolly, repel those that we don't want to work with or cannot help.
Say a little bit more about that. Why would we want to repel?
You're not going to be right for everybody. Nobody is right for everybody, and you're not going to be the solution to everybody. Because I mean, for me, for example, you know me, I do repel a lot of people because I'm very direct. I don't mess about. There's no waffle, there's no cuddling, there's no sort of comfort blanket. I'm going to tell you as it is. I'm going to tell you what you need to do, and then I'm going to make sure you do it. So it's not everybody likes that, because I'm holding you to account, and I'm also making you face stuff that you've probably avoided for many years. And so that will repel. And other people would like the comfort blanket where take me along, at a decent pace and pat me on the head whenever I do anything right. That's not me. You're not going to get that.
But then I have a huge bias because I like that approach and think if you don't like your approach, Maria, then no one's going to grow. Because I remember with me, you observed a recording of me speaking and you You did it so well, and it absolutely was spot on. One of the at the right point in the conversation, but you said to me very directly, you said, "Right, let's talk about what you're wearing." And I was like, "Oh yes, I remember. I had a lovely shirt on and da da da." And you said, "You look like an art teacher." You may not remember. And I went, "Oh my gosh, do I?" You went, "Yeah, 100%. You look like you're doing teaching art." And which is fine if I was, but I'm not. I'm speaking in corporates. So I went, "Oh gosh." And I could have gone, "Oh, well, who are you to say what I look like? I like that shirt," which you would have been fine with me saying. But I took it and went, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And you said, "See a stylist." I did. And I learned, right, actually, am I doing it today? Like tuck in,
I
iron
know
shirts.
she's not going to be very happy with me today either.
Yeah, but that's all right. We're off grid now. We're fine. But we're not in the exact space. But I really took it on board. It wasn't offensive. I thought, great. I want to grow. So, and in your book, you talk about, and in your coaching, the feedback is key. You can't have your ego in the way. So, on that regard, I would say that if people don't want to work with you, then fine, you might not be for them. But then, like, how do we grow if we don't get direct feedback? It's a thing, right?
Yeah, but some people deliver feedback in a very different way to my style, which is what other people want. And what I also find really interesting is that there'll be people that you'll work with more than one coach or mentor, or I don't call myself a coach or mentor, really. I call myself a bit of a nag bag because I just tell people what to do, really. Because I'm not a trained coach, and I'm not I'm not really a mentor. So yeah, I just tell people what to do because I believe I can see the answer or a path that will work because I've been there, done it for others and done it myself. So, but I do find that people go from one person to the other because although many people in my space and in your space will be saying the same thing, because we all say it slightly differently, it's slightly nuanced and it's slightly different style, you're attracted to different people at different stages of your
Sure.
development. And so some people
Yeah.
won't want to come to me maybe at the early stages, but when they're a bit more confident, a bit more established, they love it. Right.
Yeah.
So it takes a brave. I've actually had someone say to me that she was part of a speaker association. And when she told her colleagues that she was going to work with me, they said, "Oh, you're very brave. She's really scary," which said to me they wouldn't work with me, but she would. Right. And she did.
Yes.
And their loss, of course, Dolly, clearly.
Obviously. But no, I think there is. I mean, we're touching on a few things here, but the feedback is a key thing for communicating. To know, is it landing? Am I as impactful as I want to be? And actually, it's a continuum of confidence in spaces. And there are certain, we're early in our journey of communicating differently. We might need something a little gentler, and softer. But as we get more stronger in the muscle with feedback, we're like, yeah, hit me with it. So something I see is this sense of, but this is me. If you don't like it, I want to be authentic. This is how I communicate. It's how I'm wired. And then on the other side of it is your, if we want to call it personal branding, which is a bit of a buzzword, I suppose, within business. What is your personal brand? How are you getting influence and attracting people to your cause or your space, recognizing your worth in your career, with your ideas, etc. There does need to be a challenge to the version of yourself you're projecting, but then you've got that mindset of, why should I change? Why should I change? How do you deal with that?
Let me give you an example then. So when you go, if you're lucky enough, as I am, to still have your parents alive, when you go to your parents, the person that turns up with your parents and sits down for dinner and squabbles with your sibling, who's, yeah, I mean, we're not young, but we still squabble when we get together, is authentically you and how you authentically communicate. But you're not going to put that out into the world of business and to present you as a brand. So yes, you should be you, but not all aspects of you should necessarily show up in public. Some of it should stay at home, but there should be
Mm.
enough of it that it is you and not somebody else. It's something that I say to people, speakers that I work with, is I say to them, if you took your name out of your website or out of any of your material, would people still know it's you? There needs to be enough of your personality and originality in there that someone else who speaks on your topic when it's a speaker or works in your area of expertise can't take your text and just rip it off and use it. You have to have what's unique about you. So I've gone a bit off communication, but I suppose it is communication. You need to communicate your unique expertise, experience, credibility, stories, frameworks, whatever, your uniqueness in your communication, so that is you. And yes, some of your personality should definitely be there, but maybe not the squabbling sibling bit.
Yeah. It's so true. I was just thinking of promotion, for example. That's quite a big one. If you've worked your way up the ranks with your peers and then you happen to be team lead, for example, there's a different, that's often a dynamic that's complex for people in how they present, how they communicate with that new hat on, and adjusting to that and suddenly not being like a peer and showing a slightly different version of self, and that tension between, but I've got to be myself and how they've known me, but also I argue, well, you have a new role, a new responsibility, and it's thinking about, going back to what you said earlier, what are the outcomes you need from your communication? They're going to be different, aren't they? The roles change.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah,
probably one of the hardest changes to make, when you are part of a team and then you suddenly become the supervisor, the manager, the leader, whatever that title is, and you've got to change. And in a way, your relationships change, and you probably grieve some of what you've lost, but then you've got to look at what
absolutely.
you're going to gain.
Yeah, there is a grief there, isn't there? Of like, oh, what was, but you're having to go into new territories. So with communicating, how, so PowerPoint. Talk to me about PowerPoints. What makes a great PowerPoint presentation? What doesn't? Where are people getting it wrong with PowerPoints, slide decks? It comes up a lot, but I'd love to get your kind of 101 on the slide deck.
So for me, and how I use PowerPoint as well, I think images are far more powerful than lots of text. And I do think you should keep text to a bare minimum, ideally. And the PowerPoint should be a backdrop. It's not something you're going to be reading from. It should add to your presentation, so that if you were delivering the presentation without the PowerPoint, it wouldn't be as good as you delivering it with the PowerPoint. But if you can take the PowerPoint and then I'm no longer needed to present it because it's all written there, that's not a PowerPoint, that's a book or an ebook or an academic document. So it's got to help the audience. And if it's helping you as well, that's great, but not if you're reading from it. So I tend to use images that then remind me of a story that I'm going to tell, and the image will illustrate the story. So I often use people, and because I'm talking about speakers. So when I see a picture of a speaker and I'm introducing them, I immediately remember what the story and the point is of that. But also those individuals are looking at that speaker and probably making up their mind as to, oh yeah, this looks like a professional individual. This person doesn't always, they look quite likable, or I can see, they get to see a person and a personality and start making up their own stories as well as they're listening to me explaining about this. Oh yes, I can see that, etc., etc. PowerPoint should add, not detract.
Well, so I went to a TED day recently, and there was a great that actually the PowerPoint was far better than the person. I don't even think the person needed to be there, but it was this cartoon montage that just had these really powerful images of this person's story. And he wasn't very good at delivering his own story, but his images were fantastic. And almost it could have just been a silent PowerPoint. It would have done it all. So I know what you mean. Like images are really captivating and can evoke a real reaction, can't they? That's maybe what we're talking about. Like they need to pack a punch. But just thinking of being biased with some clients I've got where they're presenting and they have a lot of data that needs to be shared, but it's so boring. It's so boring. And when I do workshops with them, I say, just play with me and pretend that this is real. You're not allowed to put a bullet point on a piece of paper. And, it's just that method. But how would you help someone convey actually quite a lot of complex data in the right context but in a way that isn't just loads and loads of text.
You need to tell stories, and for me, the two best speakers who did this, sadly one has passed away, so look at their old videos. Probably the king was Hans Rosling, who really had a great way of sharing data and making it amazingly visual. And the other man who does it very, very well, I'm sorry, it's two men. And actually the topic of the speech that I booked him for many years ago was data is beautiful. And his name is David McCandless. And these two individuals get it right. So they're right at the
Wow.
pinnacle and the top. But storytelling is the way to do it. If you can make it tell stories around data, and only share the data that is really necessary. I think sometimes people go way too detailed when it's not really going to add and make it over complex. Because what you've got to remember is that anything that you're sharing, you've been living with it for a while, you've been rehearsing, you've been practicing, you know it. For that audience member, it's the very first time they're hearing it or seeing it, and it's a bit of a shocker.
So that, because that plays out in many spaces. I notice it even when I'm doing talks. I'm doing too much. That's a risk, isn't it? That's a common pitfall.
Yeah.
How do we get the confidence to share less?
Oh, it's amazing. The first time you do it and you share less, it's interesting because we're so close to our own content. When we're sharing less, we think, I'm not giving enough value. I'm not giving enough. It's not enough. They're paying me lots of money, or they have all these great expectations. So your natural instinct is to let's stick everything in there. Let's stick everything that I know in there. Let's stick everything that Google knows in there. Let's stick everything that ChatGPT can add to it. And the problem is people can't retain it. They can't follow you. It's too hard. You're giggling because you've probably done this. I've done it too. So if you're delivering a 30-minute speech, prepare your 30 minutes and then cut it down to 20 and just slow down.
Wow.
Is what I would do. And that's really
Wow.
hard because pausing is very hard. Slowing down is very hard. And if you need to ad lib and tell an additional story, but just cut it down. In fact, in some cases, you could cut it down to half and just add some more stories around it. The thing is, as a speaker, as a paid speaker, of course, is that if you're delivering less, you actually get invited back to go deeper. And I had one speaker who speaks with principles. He has 18 principles. And he would, when I first started working with him, in 45 minutes, he'd deliver 6 principles. And I said, cut it down to 3. And he says, no, I can't. And do you know what? He's working every single day, getting booked again and again, because he's got 18 principles. If he's doing 3 in a speech, he's got 6 speeches with every client, right?
Wow. I love that. Yes, because you want people to leave going, I want more, not to be bamboozled with, wow, that was a lot. I need to be in a dark room now. Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing you want people thinking is, I wish that had been shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to story, what are the key components as a structure for what makes a great story?
So someone who's very good on storytelling and has written a brilliant book about it called Glow in the Dark is a guy called Mark LaRousse. You might want to invite him on the podcast. And he's very good. He talks about the importance of having your own, so the story as to why you do what you do. I think, again, less is more, and it has to have a structure, has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And often the stories that people share are too long, and we put in too much detail. So although there needs to be some specificity for you to be able to connect to it and relate to it, you don't want it too long. And I think the very best storytellers are actually comedians, stand-up comedians.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are able to tell you a short story very, very succinctly. And there is an example of a brilliant story. And my memory is awful. So we'll have to go and look up so that we can credit these people. And I think the best short story was 6 words, and be prepared.
Go on.
Okay. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Right. I mean, doesn't that just move you?
Yeah.
And you're making up your own story. You're making up your own story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah. So I did 2 things then. I went straight away with, wow, that's a great listing on Craigslist or Craigslist, whatever, in America, or Facebook. And then when I saw your face, I went, oh no, that baby died.
Because that was my immediate reaction.
Yeah,
with
no,
the never
mine wasn't.
worn.
Mine was like a Facebook marketplace, like, gosh, there's just no like blah, blah, blah. But then when I saw your face, I went, what am I missing? And there's a whole nother interpretation on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's the power of few words, where you can take people on different journeys. I love that. And, you know, that brevity of being able to find those right words.
I mean, linguistics, sociolinguistics is something I've got a real thing for. I did it quite a lot at university, and cultures find their identity through the lexicon they have. So a word, if I go into a business and hear certain words bandied around and they want different performance objectives, I can see that the language they're using is keeping them stuck, and that actually we need to choose different words to create a different impact. So, for example, we've just got to be commercial. We've just got to be commercial. If that's a word that's used a lot, um, it's actually stopping people from recognizing how team building or team selling is going to be impactful for being commercial. So you want more people to work together to sell more together as a team. But if it's just about just be more commercial, we haven't got the right language in order to achieve those objectives. So I get companies, especially in communication, to come up with a dictionary of words for their talks, for their presentations, for the context that they're in. So they literally have like a little written dictionary of repeated words they can pepper in that will keep them anchored to the impact they want to have.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love that.
it's really helpful. I have it for my business, and I've given it to the people that work with me, so that, hey guys, when you're working with me, these are the words that I want to make sure you use instead of your own, to keep on brand and to keep the impact consistent. Because when people hear certain words, then it comes with that casing, and that might need to be changed and iterated over time. But it's a powerful thing, and I do say it when you're going to certain stakeholders. Notice the words they use. So if you're doing your scoping, what words are they using in their questions and answers? Borrow them and put them in the dictionary, so that when you're there, you're speaking literally their cultural lexicon, because you're going to be immediately received and paced with them more effectively to then push them, or sorry,
Absolutely.
attract them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant.
Self correction. Let's go back to the scoping, um, and reading your audience. How could people skill up if they have never really considered that? What could they do today to read their audience more, to find out more about their audience
To
within a
read that.
business, let's say, rather
To,
than.
yeah, I think learn to listen. Just stop talking. Be quiet. Listen. But also, there's a fantastic book I would actually recommend if I'm allowed. May I do that?
Please,
Yeah,
please.
because probably one of the best applications of really good communication, of course, is negotiation. And my favorite book of all time on negotiation is one that's written by former hostage negotiator Chris Voss, and it's called Never Split the Difference. I don't know if it's one that I recommended to you, but it's fantastic. And in terms of really truly understanding, because what Chris trying to do when he was negotiating with hostages was really understand what is it that's motivating them, what is it that they really want, because they don't want to kill anybody, they don't really want to be in that situation, but there is something that is hidden beneath, and he's trying to understand them at such a deep level so that they will not only let go of their hostages, but they will also surrender. Just for someone to be that understood. And I think though the lessons in hostage negotiation are phenomenal, because it's really about understanding that other individual.
That's extremely powerful. It is. So, what do you remember any of his top tips from that
Lots
book,
of
or any
them.
insights that have stayed with
Yeah,
you?
lots and lots. Because what for me what was wonderful, because of course as a speaker bureau agent, I was always negotiating. For me, I was going, yes, I do that. Yes, I do that. Yes, I do that. And then thinking, oh no, I don't do that. So couple of things that were for me wonderful is let the other side go first in a negotiation, in a communication. Let them share what they have on their mind first before you start going in with your agenda. don't assume an agenda. Let them set it so that you can start understanding a bit more. And mirroring, which we do, but mirroring the last few words. So if you said something to me, I would then repeat the last few words that you said, which would then encourage you to then keep talking. Because what I want to do is keep you talking. And one of the things that he does is that if somebody's getting very stressed or they're anxious, he goes into his DJ voice, which is a very slow, deep voice, very slow, like the midnight DJ. And apparently it brings down their stress levels, the voice itself slowing right down. And I remember an ex of mine, actually, who was brilliant at this. This was many, many years ago, before the book was even written, but he was an expert negotiator. And whenever we would have an argument, he would slow right down and go quite quiet. So I'm really, really listening to him and forgetting he won every argument. And when I was reading Chris Voss's book, I thought, I now know why he won every argument. He was so gifted at that DJ voice. I thought, blimey.
But actually, I mean, you touch on something here that people. So when I do the sort of communication piece of sharing how we use our voice as an instrument, and something I see, and I'm prone to it too, especially women. When we get nervous, our voice goes much more into our throat and goes much higher, and we go much faster, and we lose quite a lot of gravitas and kind of speak at this level. And I always go, drop it, and almost like imagine a kind of ball of energy that's up here, and go, ugh, get some breath work on it, and speak from the belly, slowing things right down so that you can come back up here and then go down. But that's what that slowing down does, really bring a bit of impact and gravitas, doesn't it, to a space. Regulates, as you were saying.
It does, with one exception. One exception, Dolly. I think Sarah Millican gets away with being high pitched. She does it brilliantly.
She's the comedian.
Yeah, it's very high pitched. Although occasionally she'll then go very deep when she's trying to make a point. But she's quite high pitched. I'm not convinced that's her natural voice. And Joe Pasquale as well, very high pitched, right? For them, it works.
Yes, you're right. So there's an exception to these rules, 100%. But thinking of our tempo and our tone as we're negotiating, sharing ideas, we need to be intentional with that, very much as a instrument and a vehicle with it. But there's an awful lot, isn't there, with communication? Like, we've got to remember to do our scoping, listen more, think of our audience. What do we do if we're doing a talk and we notice our audience? Two questions. How do we know if our audience is losing interest? And second question, how do we get them back?
So the problem you've got these days, which when I started in the industry, it didn't happen, is that people tend to go into meetings and sessions and audiences with their phones. And I remember once I did one of my very first speeches, I was talking and somebody was on their phone. And I was talking about show reels, and I was saying, listen, you don't always want an audience in your show reel, because sometimes they're just on their phone and looking down, and people will see that on video and it looks really bad. And I actually came off the stage and stood in front of him. And I said, just like this guy, he's not paying blind bit of attention to me. He's just scrolling on his phone. He hasn't even noticed I'm standing in front of me. Anyway, he then stood up directly in front of me, turned his phone to me and said, I'm making notes. I'm writing down every single thing you're saying. So sometimes it's very difficult to know if somebody is distracted or actually avidly paying attention or tweeting about how brilliant you are. You just, not that we tweet anymore, right? We've all abandoned that, but you don't necessarily know. And often my colleague, who is the expert in this area, will sit in the audience when I'm speaking, and she looks like she's chewing a wasp. Right. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm dying here. Right. And I go to her and she said, no, she was concentrating on every word. It was so blinking brilliant. It was fantastic. Best you've ever delivered. And I said, well, could you tell your face that? So sometimes the people with the most serious faces are the ones that are the most engaged. So you've got to be careful. I suppose the only true sign that you've lost them is when they get up and walk out. And again, they just might have a weak bladder.
It's really hard to spot it, isn't it? But I guess there are some cues, like, well, what I've heard is that the beginning and the end of a presentation are your key bits, your start and your end, because that's where attention span comes in at the beginning and at the end, and there's always a dip. But it's that thing of how do we, how would you, if someone has got, and again, I'm just thinking of all the people you've seen. You've seen people do it well. You've seen people be rebooked. You've seen people that aren't rebooked. So what are the things that keep people interested? Like, what traits do you see in people that are getting rebooked? Because they're obviously not losing people halfway through. What are the traits that they have that make them successful?
Two things, or three things actually. Good structure. So the structure overall is easy to follow. People don't get lost. It's sort of that you're not all over the place. So it's like, okay, you're signposting me. The other thing
Lovely.
is storytelling. Stories stick and are interesting, not too long. And then the third thing, which is my very favorite, humor. Bit of laughter.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Love that.
It's just such a lovely thing, isn't it? To be made to laugh. I saw David Mitchell, listened to him on a news thing recently. Do you know David Mitchell, a
Of
comedian? He
course,
did
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. He's one of my favorites actually, because he's also such an intelligent man. And it came up that he was talking about politics really intellectually, so insightful. And I was laughing the whole way through whilst learning about history, whilst learning about really insightful paradigms within our political system. And then the interviewer said, David, what, it's been said you should go into politics. People would vote for you. Why don't you? And he said, I just enjoy making people laugh too much. I just couldn't switch lanes. But I thought how funny that he's got such a following for political insight and historical insight whilst being funny. And therein lies the point that humor is a vehicle for translating really great information and data. It is a key component, isn't it?
One of my
What
favorite
so
speakers when I was
yeah.
booking speakers, Dolly, was a politician, William Hague, one of the funniest speakers ever. Many politicians are
Really?
actually hilarious when they're not talking about politics.
How funny. Is that a thing? I've never laughed at a politician.
William Hague,
Well,
one
I've
of the
laughed.
best. Yeah. Oh, and Charles Brandreth used
Wow.
to be an MP as well, one of the best speakers.
Gosh. Oh, I'll look them up. That's interesting. So just before we come to land, you said, what are the kind of three things you've seen people do really well that get them rebooked, which are things like good structure, signposting. There's a sort of simplicity to that, storytelling, humor. What are the three things that mean people don't get rebooked?
Often it's actually not necessarily to do with what's happening on stage. It's to do with what you're doing behind, how difficult you are to work with. So if it's,
Wow.
you need to be easy to work with. So if your ego is a bit too big and you're a bit too demanding, if you're not responsive, if you're if you're hard to get hold of, and if you don't follow the brief, you won't get booked. So those are sort of like not necessarily stage behavior. A lot of that is off
Mm.
stage behavior or pre and post. And not following the brief is a big one, because you do need to listen to what the client's wanting and be clear. And it comes back to that communication and listening again, right?
Yeah, it really does. But actually, that goes hand in hand with your personal branding and impact within a business. If you are communicating and not really getting asked for you're not getting elevated to more levels of responsibility and more inclusion in your space, it's because somehow it's the same. You're not that easy to work with. You're communicating, you're not following the brief. So you go into a meeting and you're not prepared to say the right stuff. You're waffling, you're talking about your little dog or Greg in finance, when actually the moment is not about that. It's knowing the audience, isn't it? Being easy to work with, following the brief, so that you get more influence within a business, and or whether you're being rebooked to speak. It goes back to that, follow the brief, follow what does your audience want and need from you in that context right there, right then, and hit the spot.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, Maria, there's been so many insights here along the way, and I wonder, just to kind of land it, if I was to ask you, what's a household item that you have that personifies extraordinary leadership and or extraordinary communication, what would it be?
Okay, so I mean, this is a podcast, so people won't have seen that you and I have been drinking tea throughout. You might have been drinking coffee, but I'm a tea drinker, and so I brought a tea bag because a tea bag, when you look at it, it's not particularly impressive. You don't know how strong this tea bag is until you put it in hot water. And a bit like a leader, you don't know how strong a leader is or an individual is until you put it in hot water, put that person in hot
Wow.
water under pressure, right? Under in a difficult situation. And then that tea bag shows exactly what it's made of. Just like a leader shows exactly what they're made of when they are in hot water, if you like.
I love that. It's under those circumstances that you actually get the true flavor, the true kind of richness of it.
We saw it in COVID, didn't we? We saw it in COVID. We saw who were the leaders in the companies, in the organizations. Some of us experienced it for ourselves, having to lead as well. And yes, hopefully we're never going to have that again. But we will. We always have situations and scenarios where leaders are under extreme stress in hot water all the time.
Just one sort of last question on that just to land it for leaders listening who've got teams of people that they want their teams to communicate more effectively, more impactfully. Where would you signpost them to? If you're leading a team and you're like, oh, my team don't communicate effectively, their emails are a bit bad, their presentation skills are a bit quite an overwhelming thing. I'm not saying you would have the answer, but where would you signpost them to?
I think that I'd ask them to talk to you, Dolly. I mean, where else? They don't need to go anywhere else, do they? Talk to
Well,
Dolly.
I love that plug. 100%. You, my number 0800. Here we go. um, yeah, of course, you could speak to me 1,000,000%, and I could absolutely help. Maria, thank you so much for sharing your insights and just with your wealth of experience of seeing the best, doing it yourself, and seeing repeat business through your insights. It's lovely working with someone that really knows the space well, and you obviously working with the experts in it. So all the people you've mentioned on the podcast, I will put the little references at the bottom. So do follow the links. I'll try and find something on William Hague as well and put that in, so we can actually just look at what's really great communication, and we can borrow from that. But thanks for your time. It's been lovely to have you on the show.
You're welcome. You're a lovely host.
Thanks. As you know, with this podcast, I love borrowing other people's extra to add to our ordinary. Now, whilst many of us listening to this aren't necessarily looking to be public speakers per se, the truths are paralleled. To be a speaker, you need to be good enough to be rebooked. You need to create impact and get paid for a job. So how can we in our business borrow from that so that our stakeholders, the people we are speaking to, pay us not in money, but in being influenced and being attracted to what we are sharing? It will dial up our personal branding if we take on board some of the things that Maria has shared, so that we can be more dynamic, more effective, and more equipped, I suppose, in our meetings, in our one-to-ones, in our presentations, in our pitches, in our boardroom meetings. I really want to encourage you to look at some of the resources that Maria signposted us to. I know I will, and they will be in the show notes. But thanks for diving in. And if you want help with your teams being more connected, being more impactful in their communication, then please reach out, because there are some really simple things that people don't know that you need to know to get better in this space. Reach out to me and I can discuss with you how I can help. But thanks for joining the show. It's been great to have you.